The following presentation will focus on hypothetical community college and look at policy and governance models, as well as examining the college and issues that may arise from its situation. The model that will be focused on specifically will be the Carver policy model and how it affects decisions, negotiations, and board policy.
Hypothetical Community College is a public, comprehensive, two-year higher education institution located in Northeast Ohio. HCC is an open enrollment institution that offers over 250 certificates and associate degree programs, including technical, transfer, and most recently a Bachelor of Applied Science. The college serves more than 50,000 credit and non-credit students annually. The largest industries in the area are in healthcare, manufacturing, and retail trade. The highest paying industries are in management, oil and gas extraction, as well as utilities.
Hypothetical community college is not part of a statewide system. There are some advantages and disadvantages to this. First, the advantages. One, the board is locally elected. Thus, they have vested interest in the community and surrounding region. Another advantage in terms of governance is that the college has autonomy to make decisions that affect the college and only the college, greater community, and surrounding region, instead of having to answer to a state system that may not have the best interests of the community in mind. Finally, with the size of the college, the locally elected board, and the lack of a state system, the college can respond to concerns and issues quickly and nimbly and focus on local, internal, and external factors. A couple disadvantages of not being part of a statewide system is there's less state advocacy as an independent college in terms of legislature and other resources. Another issue with fewer resources as an independent is that they may receive smaller state appropriations, which can affect funding for each budget year.
Geographically located in the Midwest, HCC is eligible for membership with the Higher Learning Commission, HLC, for accreditation which allows the institution to award approved degrees and certificates. As the institution is in good standing with the HLC, the college followed the shared governance model and has chosen the open pathway option for maintaining its accreditation. HCC will have a 4- and 10-year review based on the requirements of the open pathway option. While working through the open pathway accreditation option, stakeholder input is not only requested but needed. The college's HLC liaison works closely with ad hoc committees, which are made up of faculty, staff, and students, in collecting evidence to demonstrate the college is meeting all phases of the assurance argument and identifying areas where institutional improvement is necessary. During the reaffirmation process with HLC, Board of Trustee members are made aware of the timetable for the peer review and what will be expected of them during the visit at the monthly required meeting for the board. HCC president and the college's HLC liaison lead the conversation to board members as well as other stakeholders and present the status of the college during and following the peer review team visit. Board members are vital entities for the reaffirmation process as they are the college's highest level of governance.
The community colleges in Ohio are classified into one of three systems based on how they receive funding. HCC is not a state community college and can therefore receive local tax levies in addition to state subsidy and tuition and fees. The college receives 45% of its funding from the state, 35% of its funding is derived from tuition dollars, and the final 20% of funding is allocated via local tax levy. The taxpayers just recently approved a levy in 2018 for another 10 years of funding. The 10-year $3.2 mil levy generates around $28 million annually for the college. It costs the owner of a $100,000 home around $98 per year and allows students who live in the service area a discounted tuition rate. Since 2011, Ohio funds colleges based 100% on performance. The funding formula allocates 50% of course completion, 25% for success points, which is the progression in developmental math and English, and the final 25% is awarded for students earning certificates, associate degrees, or transferring to a 4-year institution with at least 12 credit hours.
HCC recognizes that community college students may have an interest in continuing or regenerating their athletic career once accepted to the institution. Following the approval by the Board of Trustees, college athletics is part of the institution's landscape to provide a well-balanced college experience. Student athletes will gain valuable opportunities to be part of a team and work in harmony in an effort to obtain a common goal. As a way to ensure the institution upholds Title IX gender equity requirements, the college is offering 5 sports: women's volleyball, basketball, and softball, as well as men's basketball and baseball. With approval by the college to offer intercollegiate athletics, HCC applied to and was accepted into the National Junior Collegiate Athletic Association and the Ohio Community College Athletic Association to participate in all 5 sports on a national and local level. HCC met all eligibility requirements established by the governing bodies of the NJCAA and OCCAA. Participating student athletes will qualify for athletic and academic awards and acknowledgments. HCC's president requested a marketing assessment by an independent company, ABC Marketing, of its athletic department, as well as to identify the level of visibility the college's athletic teams have with internal and external constituencies. The final draft will be presented to the Board of Trustees at their monthly required meeting. The goal of the assessment and the presentation is to devise a plan to engage support by faculty, staff, students, and external stakeholders in the athletic department and support of the college's student athletes.
So the Carver board governance model fundamentally places the focus for a board on sort of the broad, high-level goals for the college, and it leaves the day-to-day operation for how the college achieves those goals to the organization's leadership and staff. So following this model, the board defines sort of the ends for where the organization should get to, and they place less emphasis on how the college gets there. As we know, the Carver model calls for the board to empower the president and the respective staff to manage the day-to-day operations and to determine the best course of action through decision-making that ultimately aligns to the values set forth by the board. And of course, the board ultimately holds the college president accountable for steering the college to the destination that has been chartered by the board. Now for HCC, we do like the Carver model, but we are proposing a modified version that we'll explain now.
Hypothetical Community College is strongly committed to shared governance and follows a modified version of the Carver policy governance model. This transparent system ensures that every stakeholder at the college has a chance to provide input and recommendations concerning the college's operation and achieving the college mission. It is modified since the board operates with a committee structure for finance and governance, and the president works closely with the board chair, but the board is hands-off in the day-to-day operation of the college. Shared governance at HCC operates through a collaborative decision-making process in which the members of each of the major campus constituencies, the Board of Trustees, the administration, the faculty, the staff, and the students play an appropriate role.
Like Ami referenced, we chose to incorporate a modified version of the Carver model of board governance with an emphasis in the board being a part of the shared governance model at HCC. See, we believe community college boards should certainly define the expected outcomes for the college, and while the board has ultimate authority along with the president, we do not believe they should solely determine and solely set the policies that guide the day-to-day operations for the college to achieve those outcomes. As such, we believe the board should indeed set the high-level expected outcomes for the college. They should certainly participate in the policymaking process as part of the shared governance approach, They should include the prescribed shared governance model of HCC following the PMOPS process in establishing college policy. Now, as an aside, the PMOPS process will be further described in just a couple of minutes. The board should also hire the college president, hold the president accountable for implementing the policies and reaching the expected outcomes set forward by the board, and the board should certainly continue to reinforce the high-level values for the college. We believe this approach reinforces the shared governance model of HCC, giving the board and the president the ultimate authority to select policy, but not without broad input and collaboration from the various shared governance groups.
Through shared governance, the college community has the opportunity to influence decisions by enabling representative groups to work cooperatively in making attentive and timely recommendations to the administration on matters of planning effectiveness, policy, procedure, and program. When widespread input is needed, committees are formed, charged, and deployed to make recommendations and provide input jointly among the faculty, staff, and students to administration and/or the proposed senates, depending on the issue. The task can be assigned directly to a senate, or alternatively, the task can also be assigned to a standing or an ad hoc committee, again, depending on the issue. The decision-making process depicted here clarifies the roles and responsibilities of the faculty, staff, students, executive council, and board of trustees. Regardless of the role, it is expected that all participants will place the greater good of the institution over the interest of the individual group into governance recommendations. Depending on the issue and if the task is assigned directly to a committee, the college constituents work with their associated senate, faculty, staff, or student for approval before the policy is presented to the Shared Governance Council. The council is composed of the executive cabinet and representation from each of the senates, faculty, staff, and student. Information is evaluated and, if needed, returned to the committee for additional detail. Final decisions are then made by executive council. If a policy is being evaluated and has been approved by the Shared Governance Council, the representative from executive council prepares the board meeting cover sheet where the item is either presented at the work session or voted on during the meeting, and this is decided by the college president. Once the board approves the policy, it's added to the college portal and the policy is adopted. The policy is then monitored by the owner for periodic review.
The following slides are the principles of policy development under the shared governance model at Hypothetical Community College. Please take the time to read through the slides as I relay some pertinent information. Hypothetical Community College has established principles that are vital to the mission and vision, and most importantly, they outline the values of the institution. The goal of the principles is to depict a culture of open communication, judicious governance, and mutual relationships that is practiced by all constituents of the college. When an issue is presented, the principles and policies are always strongly considered and implemented, especially when it concerns issues in finance, administration questions, or the values and culture of the institution. The principles are used as umbrella statements to provide a standard framework for more specific or departmental policies and describe what the Board of Trustees and the administration and the other constituents of the college use in order to reach decisions regarding the institution.
Interest-based bargaining, also known as win-win bargaining, is an effective tool to use within the model of shared governance. In most instances, both sides will use a problem-solving method to find something that's acceptable in a negotiation. Both sides must have buy-in to the process, and typically there is some training that happens before negotiations.
For HCC, care must be taken to ensure that all new policies or revisions to existing policies follow a very deliberate, informed, and inclusive process. Considering our modified version of the Carver model, along with our value of shared governance, we believe the best approach evolves around the fundamental notions of a problem-solution orientation, following the procedural model of problem solving, or PMOPS for short. This model is a flexible framework that can guide each phase of the policymaking or problem-solving process. And while not all board policymaking obviously centers around an attempt to solve a problem, many policies are created in an attempt to address a problem or to prevent a problem from occurring. Thus, the steps of the procedural model of problem solving will actually aid the HCC board in their policymaking process and will formally allow for the robust HCC shared governance model to be engaged. The first steps of PMOPs is to describe and analyze the problem. So fundamentally, before the board begins to draft a new policy or a modification to an existing policy, they first have to determine and define what problem they are trying to address. So in this early stage of the process, they consider what is currently unsatisfactory, what is desired, and what obstacles might exist. So valuing the importance of shared governance, the board will rely on college leaders and other experts to help them understand that problem or challenge. The point of this early stage of policymaking is to ensure that every HCC stakeholder, to include the board members, are fully educated and aware of the need for a new modified or existing policy to be modified. So then once the board and all shared governance stakeholders fully understand the nature of the problem or the need for a policy, the second stage of the policymaking process at HCC is focused on generating and understanding possible solutions. Now during this stage, HCC and the board focuses on generating and understanding all possible solutions to the problem. They do not deliberate over which solution might be the best to integrate into the policy. That deliberation comes later. It is important that the shared governance groups and the board creatively investigate all possible solutions and consistently seek alternative possible solutions before the board and the president settle on the chosen solution that may end up in the actual policy. So then once all possible solutions have been noted, the shared governance group representatives and the board carefully examines all of them through a critical and objective process. So this process involves first establishing criteria for evaluating the solutions. These criteria become the standards by which each solution is weighed against. And after each possible solution has been vetted against the established criteria, the board carefully narrows down the list of possible solutions. So to do this, the board weighs the feedback of the shared governance groups and charts the pros and cons, as well as evaluates the advantages and disadvantages of each possible solution. Again, during this evaluation process, they formally garner feedback from all stakeholders, as well as provide opportunities for public comment. So the fourth step of PMOPs is to actually choose the best solution. At this stage, the board has received plenty of feedback on what now constitutes just a small list of possible solutions that may ultimately find their way into the policy. It is now time for the board to formally and publicly contemplate which solution they feel will best address the problem or the need. And as this process unfolds, more comment from the shared governance groups and the public is welcomed and heard, and eventually a motion is made, formal vote for the solution is called, and providing a majority of the trustees vote in favor of the chosen solution, the board staff begins working on generating the actual formal policy. So the next step of PMOPs is to generate and approve the policy. So with all this foundation work now past the board, it's time for the policy to be drafted, discussed, and ultimately voted on. Once the draft policy is written, the public is provided with the draft to review, and it is placed on the formal agenda for deliberation and action. During this public meeting, the board formally deliberates over the draft policy. They allow for public comment and move the policy to a vote. If the board approves the policy, a formal implementation date is established for HCC, along with a plan for the HCC president to periodically come back to the board to discuss the outcomes of the policy. It is important to note that the institutions implement and they assess and they communicate the outcomes of the policy. So to do this, the Board of Trustees are very formal in noting the implementation date that is expected of all the HCC policies. The board also requires the president to develop an assessment plan that will be used to assess the outcomes of the policy after it is implemented. And finally, the board formally integrates the requirement into policy for the presidents or other leaders to communicate back to the board to describe how the policy implementation is going to incrementally present on the outcomes of the policy implementation. So this slide illustrates a visual of the PMOPs process playing out within the HCC shared governance model with consideration of our modified Carver model of board governance. So if you take a look at the center line in this model, this is representative of each step of the PMOPs process. You'll see define the problem and explain the possible solutions, evaluate the solutions, choose the best solutions, and of course then the policy is generated. But on the top and bottom row of this visual model Each of the HCC shared governance groups are represented with the appropriate inputs into each stage of the policymaking process. So now, let's take a look at how the PMOPS model might play out in the context of a real HCC policy development process.
As we've described, HCC and the Board of Trustees use the procedural model of problem solving as the framework for their policy process. Here's an example of this process playing out at HCC to address the perceived challenges with the current remedial education model at HCC. First, the shared governance groups, including the Board of Trustees, seek to understand the current problem with the remedial education model that is in place. To do this, a few of the trustees and representatives of the shared governance groups will attend some national conferences that focus on remedial education reform. And as a result, they would learn who the national experts are in this space and what some of the best practices are for remedial education reform. Next, the board would invite some of these national experts to HCC, where they will present at several board meetings. Their presentations would be filled with both national data as well as data specific to HCC that highlights the need for the remedial education model to be transformed. Local experts like the math and the English faculty, as well as administrative leaders, would also be asked to present to the board with their understanding of the current problems with the remedial education model. This early engagement with local stakeholders will prove to be beneficial later once the policy is approved, as these local stakeholders would be asked to implement the policy. Ultimately, the HCC board and other shared governance groups now understand that the vast majority of students who place into HCC's traditional math and/or English remedial education courses do not end up graduating from college. Armed with this knowledge that the HCC's remedial education system is broken, everyone now understands the problem and the need for the new policy to ultimately reform remedial education.
Now that the problem with HCC's remedial education model is understood, the board and shared governance groups turn their attention to looking at a variety of possible solutions. Once again, the board holds various special meetings where national and local experts are called upon to present to the board a variety of remedial education reforms. Leaders from Complete College America, the Dana Center, other community colleges, and the American Association of State Colleges and Universities will present several different solutions to the group that center around national best practices in the remedial education reform movement. During the solution-oriented special meetings of the board, local stakeholders are also asked to provide additional possible solutions. There are solutions that focus on reducing the number of developmental courses in the sequence, solutions that focus on eliminating traditional developmental education altogether, and solutions that focus on a combination of both. During these brainstorming times, there is certainly no shortage of possible solutions generated, and it is important that every voice is heard.
Once a comprehensive list of solutions is generated, it is time for the board to establish criteria by which they will evaluate each possible solution. Once again, the board calls upon local stakeholders to help inform the establishment of the criteria, as well as look at pros and cons of each possible solution. The level of engagement from each shared governance group should be high during this phase of the process as well. During this process, the board will undoubtedly value the public and internal stakeholder participation. Ultimately, the board will narrow down the list of possible solutions to just two. After much deliberation, the board and shared governance groups reach consensus. The first possible solution is to reduce the number of remedial courses to just one for math and one for English. The second possible solution is to do away with all traditional remedial education courses and implement a co-requisite model. The co-requisite approach will place all students who are not quite college ready into math and or English courses that combine the gateway college level math and English course along with one remedial course within the same course. So, upon completing the one co-requisite math course, the student will essentially have completed their gateway math course while simultaneously taking care of their specific remedial needs. It is now time for the board and the president to choose the best solution that will ultimately inform the new policy.
Given the amount of time and attention that has been placed on understanding the problem, as well as evaluating all possible solutions, now that it is time to select the best solution, the board and the president are able to quickly reach a decision. A motion is made and seconded to select the co-requisite model as the solution that would frame out the new policy. The motion ends passing with a majority vote of the board with consensus by the HCC president. A co-requisite math and English policy is written and presented to the board for final approval. Before the policy can be formally approved, the board needs to determine the implementation date, policy assessment plan, and the requirements for implementation follow-up.
So while it is way too early to determine whether this new co-requisite math and English policy is working, what is worthwhile to reinforce is that the process that the HCC shared governance groups and the HCC Board of Trustees went through to arrive at such a policy. Everyone was deliberate in first seeking to understand the problem or need for the policy. Further, they did not quickly jump to solutions right away. Rather, they relied both on national experts as well as local faculty and local leaders to help frame up the possible solutions. They weighed all possible solutions against objective criteria that were informed by local stakeholders, and they looked at the pros and cons of each solution as a means of narrowing down the list. They ended up selecting a solution and implementing a policy after hearing from all stakeholders. Thus, the HCC shared governance model and this modified Carver model of board governance worked. So once the policy is written and approved, the HCC president and executive administration must broadly communicate the policy to all stakeholders. They must implement the policy, and over time, they should assess the outcomes of the policy. As noted earlier, the Board of Trustees holds the college president accountable for communicating the outcomes of the policy back to the board in a predictable and regular time frame.
Thank you for viewing our presentation on Hypothetical Community College. At this point, we encourage you to ask questions and develop a discussion or conversation about what we have covered. Once again, thank you for your attention and time.